This is an after-school program podcast.
Welcome to the Home Studio Hangout podcast, where we explore what it's like building, running, and working out of a home studio with your hosts, Joshua Matotek, Andrew Simmons, and many guests in different areas of the music industry.
Hey there, and welcome to the second episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about DAWs, digital audio workstations. This one's specifically geared towards newer people in audio, people that are just kind of getting started, looking for what software they might need to get started recording music and writing music. We go through a lot of different options for your digital audio workstation, different types of software, pros and cons for each. This would be a great one for you to grab a notepad, take some notes, kind of make some decisions for yourself. But we also give you our suggestions, mine and Josh's suggestions, for what we think are great starting software DAWs for you to use even if you're just starting out. I think you're going to really like it. So let's get right into it. Welcome back. Episode 2. Today, we are talking about DAWs. What are they? What does it mean? Why are there letters? And, you know, different aspects that have to do with the DAWs. Yeah, why are there letters? I don't know. But we're back. Andrew here with old Josh.
Here. That's me.
You know, hanging out, talking about audio, having a good old time.
Thriving.
Let's get right into it, man. What is a DAW? So, we have, you know, as an audio person, you'll hear this a lot, but a DAW, a DAW, also known as a digital audio workstation. That's what if you ever see the word DAW or hear the word DAW, that's what that means. Digital audio workstation. So we're just kind of going to go through some things that kind of make up a DAW. We're going to talk about some interfaces and how it works with the DAW, different parts of a digital audio workstation that you might need to know, and then also some like a few weirder things that we have near the end of it, and then some really important information as our last point that you need to hear about making you sound good.
The most important thing.
The most important information. If you learn nothing from this, wait till the end and you will learn something that I don't know. Some people know, some people don't. Some people are not intelligent. Be intelligent. Isn't that right, Josh?
Yes.
All right, so why don't we go through and kind of give the people your definition of a DAW.
A DAW is a piece of software that allows you to record, edit, and mix music. Well, sounds even.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, we have people using DAWs who don't even work with music.
Like Foley artists.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the fundamentals really come down to simply record, edit, and we won't even call it mix. We'll call it process.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's what it is. Technically, you know, something as simple as like Audacity or even GarageBand is a DAW, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
we can kind of get into like, you know, listing some of the major ones. So, you know, he just said Audacity, which is made by Adobe. And then we also have, what was the other one that you said? GarageBand.
GarageBand.
The old classic.
The classic.
A lot of people start on GarageBand. A lot of people, I've actually seen some guys make some pretty dope projects and records on just using GarageBand that get super creative. So we got GarageBand is an Apple specific DAW. Also in that vein, kind of the upgrade from GarageBand, you have Logic Pro. Then we move over to the non-Mac specific stuff. So Pro Tools is a DAW, or Digital Audio Workstation. Pro Tools is a DAW. We have Cubase, which is a Josh favorite. Josh uses Cubase. Josh also used Pro Tools. You did at one point for a while.
Yeah,
I also use Pro Tools for a lot of different editing and mixing things. Ableton Live, that is a very good. That's kind of a unique piece because it is a DAW in the most sense, but is also a live performance tool kind of together. That's kind of what makes it super unique. And what you'll learn is like they all do very unique things that kind of set them apart. That's what makes them different. That's what makes them super fun. Let's see, what's another one? Reaper. That's another popular one because it's free.
I'm using it right now.
Yeah, using it to record this podcast.
Yeah, I use it for all my more mundane recording tasks because I know it is not going to break.
Yep.
I also used it for whenever I would play shows. I'd use it to run my backtracks because the routing is super flexible and easy. And you could literally run Reaper off of a flash drive, which is crazy.
That's amazing. Yeah, I know a lot of live bands are using Reaper to run their backtracks or like run their MIDI light rigs live, things like that.
I think that the two live ones are definitely Ableton and Reaper.
Yeah.
Some of the most common ones that you'll see.
Yeah, and then I know Logic is pretty popular with live people, but it's a little less stable. And then we also get into what's some more Sonar. Yeah, that's the one. I was like, there's another one that I can never remember.
Sonar Cakewalk, or is that what Sonar is?
Yeah, Cakewalk Sonar's made by Cakewalk, I think, or is it the other way around? I can never remember.
Studio One.
Yeah, I don't know. We're probably both wrong, and it's probably something totally different. But yeah, that's kind of a more obscure one. I was trying to think. I can't really think of anything else. I'm sure there are more. Oh, FL Studio. That's a super popular one.
FL Studio. I was going to say that earlier, but then you started talking about Ableton also being live performance.
Yeah, that's true. Well, yeah, FL Studio, it kind of goes hand in hand with Ableton. A lot of hip hop guys and pop guy. I know some pop guys that are using FL Studio.
It's big in EDM, surprisingly.
Yeah, EDM. I think the big EDM three are FL Studio, Ableton, and Cubase. Because I know Zed uses Cubase a ton.
Yeah. And so we got Pro Tools, Reaper, Logic Pro, Sonar. Did I say Studio One yet?
Oh, Studio One. Yeah, that was the other one.
Yeah. Yeah. I said that while we were talking. And
I got you.
It's cool, man.
No, I missed that one. Yeah, you're right. Studio One. I know a lot of people that use that one too. I know a lot of mastering engineers that use Studio One.
Because it has a built-in mastering suite.
Yeah.
I used it for one record, and I decided I'm never doing that again.
Yeah, that's true.
But
yeah, and then you have...
It's really dope. I just didn't take the time to learn it.
Okay, well then technically, so we also have Wavelab, which is made by the same people that make Cubase. But Wavelab is is a mastering suite specifically. Because then you kind of get into some of those things. And there are some other DAWs that are kind of specific to mastering.
Oh, dude. Reason is another DAW.
Oh yeah. So Reason for me, I always think of Reason because I used Reason back in the day when Reason didn't take audio. Reason only used to take MIDI.
Because I know that it's real big. Like a lot of guys will have Reason, but then they'll rewire it through whatever their main DAW is.
Yeah, because
of the cool like synth routing and
dude, the synth engines in Reason are some of the most unique soft synths that you can only get. You can't get them anywhere else but buying Reason.
Yeah,
I think they have a rack module now that you can kind of buy just the synths, but like, yeah, they're super cool, and like they have a very, like I said, they have a very unique sound to them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those are all of like, at least the ones that I can think of. Those are some pretty. I think that's all a pretty expansive list of all of the
Bitwig.
Shouts to the.
I'm on fire, dude. I'm on fire. What about what's the one called? Mix Rack? What is it? I have the demo. No, I deleted the demo. It's Harrison Console's Mix something, and it's supposed to be like you're mixing on a desk. And I installed the demo, looked at it for 30 seconds, immediately uninstalled it.
Oh, and then what's the one? Is it Luna?
Luna from UAD.
Yeah, that's like a new one.
That's a new one. Hey,
yeah.
But no, it's not a DAW. It is a whatever they're calling it. They keep saying it's not a DAW, but it's a DAW, and
it's essentially a DAW. If they can please give me a reason why it's not one, but it's one from everything that I've seen.
It's not a DAW, but it is.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a pretty expansive list of all of those. The big thing is like, just pick one. They all kind of do. I mean, do your research for sure. You know what I'm saying? When you're if you're like picking one, so like let's kind of talk about choosing one. Really, they all have. What we're going to talk about is they all have pretty basic functions, and we'll kind of go between, specifics as we're going through different kinds of functions.
Yeah.
But like, do your research. We're going to help you as much as we can, but do your own research too, and kind of. I think all of them that we listed have free trials. So download a free trial, kind of see if it works for you, if it works for the way your mind like kind of uses software.
I'll say real quick, if anybody wants to try out Logic, I always thought there wasn't a demo for it, but there is. It is not in the Apple store. It is on the Apple website that you go to, and you could download a trial.
Yeah, and then like a lot of them have free versions. Like Reaper is free until you like pay whatever the thing is. You could perpetually demo it if you needed to, but it's a fully fleshed out demo.
I'm gonna pull up Reaper on my computer just to see.
But then like Pro Tools has a free version. Ableton comes with a lot of MIDI controllers, which is like, for those of you who don't know, a MIDI controller is like those keyboards that don't have sounds built into them. They're just used to control sounds inside of your computer. But a lot of smaller MIDI control keyboards come with a light version of Ableton to kind of get you started, which is extremely helpful. So things are available to you. All of those are demos available. Like you can get the suite version of Ableton Live, which I also have. You can demo that, like, and kind of see if it works for you. It's a very different one. Like I said, Pro Tools has free ones. Like you said, Logic has free ones.
Studio One has a free one, but then what's unique about them is you could download like their artist version, right? But then you could buy features.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's what Sam did, because he's a Studio One user. So he bought like the middle tier, because at the time he was like, I'm just doing demos, and now like we're writing all the time together. So he ended up buying the third-party plugins thing, and then he bought the he bought stuff from there, and then I think he just finally did the full upgrade once like the latest Studio One came out.
We should probably clarify. Sam is Josh's co-writer, which we will talk about more on a different episode. But just to clarify, Sam and Josh work together on a lot of top lining and co-writing and songwriting together for pitching and a bunch of other things that you guys do together.
All the things, dude.
All the things. But yeah, so we can kind of dive into it from there. But yes, just kind of do your research, pick one. We're going to help as much as we can. So let's start from opening a session. So when you open a session, generally, you are either going to come to one of two things. You're going to it's going to either open a completely blank session, which is what Ableton does.
That's what Reaper does.
Or it's going to open a dialog box to help you like get your session's information correct, which is like what Pro Tools does. Logic has a dialog box. Cubase does something. It's just like it's got a dialog box as well, correct?
Yeah, it has a dialog box, and then it also has this really weird feature I'll talk about later.
Yeah.
Where it's like when you're in the dialog box, you're also like halfway into a project. It's crazy. So I'll talk about that in a bit. Yeah, it's super important.
So they'll bring up a dialog box, and whenever you what you're going to do in that, if it brings up that box, is you're going to input like the name of the session. You're going to select your sample rate and your bit depth, which we're not going to go super into today, but you'll select that. You'll select if you want it interleaved, which we're also not going to go, a bunch of like technical terms. But we're going to be mainly talking about the session naming, which is extremely important. And we're going to talk about your folders and like selecting your folders. So that's the other thing. In that dialog box, you can select where your session is going to be placed. So let's talk about the folders stuff first. So whenever you're prepping a session, maybe even before you open a session, right? You should probably try and get your folders at least to be a little organized, depending on how you do it. And everybody kind of has their own way of doing it, and you can kind of figure out what way works for you.
And to clarify, whenever you're saying folders, you're referring to where all the information for that session is going.
Yes.
Because this is a huge issue that I had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So Josh has a problem of saving things to folders all across his computer, so he can't find everything and then has to search it all down.
Yep.
So whereas if you make sure that you have so in my folders, I'm going to go to my Finder real quick and kind of just go through the breakdown of my folders. So I have it's under my documents, it's documents, and then I have a separate Pro Tools sessions folder, and then I also have an Ableton sessions folder. So depending on what DAW I'm using, those are separated. So if I were to click on the Pro Tools sessions folder, under that I have all artist names that I'm working on right now. And this is the same setup that I have in all of my hard drives as well. So all the artist names that I'm working on. I then, below that, I have what record I'm working on. So if it's a repeat, I have all of their previous stuff listed by year and album name. And then also, or if it's just a single, I have the name and then single. For some, if it's a bunch of singles, like I have with the after school program, which is a couple projects that I work on, I have that listed by in production, writing, and completed. So that's a 0, 1, 2. So writing is 0, in production is 1, and 2 is completed. So that way I can always go back and kind of see, I know where things are, but that's also particular to that artist. And then in my Ableton one, it's the same setup. I have inside Ableton sessions, I have all of the artists' folders, and then inside those folders, I have their sessions broken down into either a record or singles, respectively. So that is what we mean by like getting your folders kind of set up to set yourself up for success with your folders and be organized, so you don't do what Josh does, which is.
So let me take you on a journey. When I started using Pro Tools, I was in audio classes, so I learned the ins and outs of the program, especially the folder system. So my audio drives, whenever I was on Pro Tools, was very, very organized. Fast forward a few years, I got tired of paying for the update and support programs, and I figured, well, instead of spending $300 to make Pro Tools work with my new OS, I can always just pay the same amount and get Cubase. So I got it, and I had assumed that it would automatically do what Pro Tools was doing for me, which is whenever I name a session, it would name a folder the same name, and then it would put everything inside of that folder.
So,
Cubase,
and that's something that I was going to say, well, that's something that Pro Tools does. That's also something that Ableton does. And I think most DAWs do that. So whenever you name the session, it creates a folder with that session name, and inside it puts the project file, all of the audio files you use, all of the MIDI files, and all of the recorded information, so that's all in one place for you.
Yep. And so what ended up happening is if you name a session, it won't name the folder that.
So this is specifically in Cubase.
Yeah. And so how I work, like I'll work on something until it's done. And then once it's done, the most that I have to pull from that session again would be stems, but I already have them rendered out and saved to my Dropbox. And my Dropbox is insanely organized, and way more so than my audio drive, simply because the Dropbox is, at the end of the day, what keeps the final versions of these projects, not the sessions.
And I was going to say stems being the individually bounced out parts of the song, such as all the guitars bounce down to one, or all the drums bounce down to one, all the vocals, etc.
Precisely. And so by the time I realized, because most of the time the Cubase dialog, it pulls up your recent sessions, so I would just go into it from there. Never even thought to check my audio drive, and if I needed to pull up a session, I would search for it and then open up the Cubase CPR file, and it would launch the session. So I never ever once in my mind thought how disorganized this would be. And scrolling through my audio drive right now, I have session folders with session files mixed in with backup files. And then I have a ridiculous amount of folders that are called Untitled dash, and then whatever number they are, with the whole project in them. So that is where I'll find my audio, images, track pictures, backup files, and session file. So welcome to my world. No, I haven't completely fixed it yet, but I at least got it to where everything was going into a folder.
Yeah.
So they're all in folders, and if it's something really important that I know that I might have to open in a while, then I'll kind of put it in a special place. But for the most part, it's not that big of a deal to me, because like I said, a lot of these projects I'm doing, it's like at the end of the day, like for instance, I literally just got asked for stems for a track that I did this time last year, but all my stems are in Dropbox.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it doesn't really matter.
It's not that big of a deal for me. But yeah, I'm going to be getting like a new drive set up. And once I do that, it's going to be a lot more organized. And I got to check in and, see if it'll just name it automatically, or I could just stop being lazy and just name every single one. But the fact that you could search the session name and it still pops up is no big deal.
Yeah.
But I won't talk about how I finally realized this, because that was very embarrassing.
Yeah. But something else to say about that is, so collaboration is a very big thing. A lot of times, especially when you're working in the same DAW, the same DAW as somebody else, you'll often send the session back and forth. So this is something that I learned. I don't remember when. It was really awkward though when I learned it. I sent. So whenever you go into the file, whenever you make the session, it names a folder, the session name, and you go into that, and then there's the actual like session file, but then there's also, like I said before, an audio files folder with all of the audio files from that session that it pulls from. All of the MIDI files, a lot of fade files. So if you've made any crossfades or any fades in and out in that session, it saves all of that information in that folder. Basically, all of your information is in other folders. The actual session file doesn't have anything. It's all it has is like where to put all of those pieces. It's just a directory. So
let me guess, you just sent the session file.
Oh, I definitely just sent the session file to somebody.
Like what I just did 6 months ago after I already knew this and I literally took a class on it.
Mm-hmm. It happens to the best of us.
I wasn't thinking. It happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
Session files will get you. Oh, man. I can't believe I just admitted that on the record.
Yeah, exactly. So whenever you're sending it, make sure you're zipping all of that stuff together. You can even go back and just compress. Zip in Windows, compress in Mac. All of that folder down into a single folder to send it to somebody. So when they open it up or unzip it, they have all of the information that they need, so they can just open up the session file and everything's where it should be.
Yeah. So that's another thing. For people who are sending session files back and forth, that's huge. You have to be organized.
Oh yeah.
Being that, like, technically I could send session files to Sam and he can open them because he's on Studio One, and so you can open Cubase files on Studio One, but we couldn't do it the other way around. So we tried doing the there's some universal file type it didn't work. So how we work is we have a shared Dropbox folder, and once again the Dropbox is very organized, and we will render our stems directly into there. So a lot of these times we both have our own session, and then we're building that session remotely using the files that we exchange.
Yeah, that's
and
a great
then at the end of it, I mix it all, and then it's done.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, it also makes it really, really easy because you could render things directly to the Dropbox folder.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a great idea. And then it automatically uploads and it's there, and then you can say, hey, bounced everything out. Should be uploaded soon.
Yep, we will FaceTime, and like the other day I called him up, was like, can you cut vocals real quick? And sure enough, he banged out all of these backing vocals, and he just rendered them right to the Dropbox folder, and I literally watched them pop up. And I just dragged them right into my DAW.
Yeah. So that's a good, that's our big talk on folders. They matter a whole lot.
They matter so much.
Please keep them together and be organized. Learn to be organized up front. It'll save you a ton of headache. Then we move on to like the next part of that dialog box, which would be sample rate and bit depth. So I'm gonna try to explain it as easily as I can. It is a decently complex topic. We could probably do at least a partial episode on it, but I'm gonna kind of give you like the basic understanding of it, which is sample rate is, so if you think of a graph, right? You have all these points, all of these peaks going from a bottom to top, right? So you have a median line going from bottom to top. What the sample rate is taking between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz and saying, here is all of the important information, and how high you set that, more dots are on that ladder, that median line. It has more information to go off of. So when you're doing a 44.1K, so 44,100 hertz is 44,100 dots in that line.
An easier way to think about this would also to simply just think about the difference between, for those of us who are old timers, and you remember the 240p YouTube videos versus the 4K ones. Mm-hmm. It's essentially audio resolution if you think about it.
Yeah, it's very much audio resolution. It's a great way to think about it too. If you're watching a video and you put it in, 240p versus 4K, like the resolution is going to be ridiculous. It's going to be like super fuzzy, and you can see the individual cubes in it sometimes if it's low enough resolution. But versus a 4K, it's like super clear and like the person standing in front of you. But so to continue what I was saying, 44.1 is 44,000. Then you go to 48, and that's just more little dots that they added to make that picture just a little bit clearer. And then you go up and up when you're eventually like at 128K, which is like theoretically super clear at a point. So like ideally you would want the highest sample rate, but so here's the thing. Higher sample rate also means larger file size. So every audio file that you put in that is like 128K versus 44.1K. A single audio file in 128 is going to be like almost an entire session sometimes, depending on how long it is in a 44.1.
Yeah. Oh man, whenever we would go to a studio to track drums, and because there's so much stretching involved while editing, you kind of have to track drums at a higher sample rate. Mm-hmm. So he was only at 96.
Yeah, which is like, that's pretty standard for larger studios. Generally like to track at 96 because larger studios also work with orchestras and choirs, a little more things that require a lot more realism. Yeah,
and so because of that, the session files were massive. Mm-hmm. They were like one drum session was like the size of like 3 of my pre-pros.
Yeah, exactly. It's So bit depth is essential. So sample rate is the clarity of the actual sound. So it's the clarity of the tone of the audio file. The bit depth is the clarity of the volume. So it is reading how quiet versus how loud it is. And there's other things that you do with dithering and that kind of thing, but I don't want to get super in the weeds on a lot of that kind of stuff. But yes, so I mean, really, 24-bit for your bit depth is a safe place to be at all. I don't think I ever do anything. I don't really do 32-bit float very much, which is your higher option, or 64-bit float. I don't really do 32-bit float that often.
Do you want to know why I do 32-bit float?
Why?
Because I can.
Yeah. If you can, yeah, why not? I try to save, once again, I try to save space on my computer so that I don't have a ton of massive session files. And it also is easier to send back and forth. And I haven't found that 32-bit versus 24-bit makes a massive difference, to me at least. So like being safe, 44.1 on your sample rate and 24-bit is honestly like a really good base level to start at. You can't really go wrong. There's really no reason to go 16-bit. Yeah, because
what is this, 1995?
Well, and most things don't. That's CD resolution, and most things aren't going to CDs anymore. So most things are going direct to online, and it can take a higher bit depth. So why not? Like it's gonna sound. It does sound better between 16 and 24. Like
it does
significantly.
100%.
Significantly.
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, that's a basic overview of that. Like I said, you can get extremely deep on that kind of stuff, and we may one day. That is a very high level topic that I might bring in
Brandon.
I might bring in the guy that taught me from Charlotte. He does a lot of like he works with like DaBaby and stuff like that. He does a lot of that kind of stuff. So he does some mastering too. The guy that taught me all about sample rate and bit depth and everything like that. So we might bring him in to have a conversation about that. But moving on, we go to session naming. This is I would argue equally as important as your folder system. Has a lot to do with your folder system, but session naming is incredibly important.
It's so important. I used to name everything just whatever, and I still do. Like I name like demos.
Yeah.
If it's just an idea, sure, it's getting whatever first comes to my mind.
Yeah.
But whenever you are working with an artist, or if you are working on an important project, you need to have a structure so you could find your sessions.
Yeah, for sure. And I also heard this from a beat maker, which is always name your beats, because it gives it more life immediately. Like if you're just a beat maker and you're like, don't name it Trap Beat 2.
I made that mistake.
Yeah, well, you forget you forget what's in it.
Mm-hmm.
But two, it doesn't. When you name it that and you never come up with a name, and somebody's trying to buy a beat and you have Trap Beat 2, well, that doesn't sound very interesting to somebody trying to buy a beat.
Yep.
So, but then you also get into the larger scale of session naming, which is full project naming, and you get into like when you're doing mix sessions and editing sessions and pre-production sessions and stuff like that.
Yep. And sometimes it's always a good idea to include the sample rate, bit depth, and the key and tempo of the song in the session name, especially if you're working with other people. That also goes for your session folder.
Yes.
Like, I mean, that's something that I do all the time. Well, I'm always including tempos. More times than not now, I'm now including like the key as well, just because it makes it easier while you're like building a song with somebody.
For sure.
And, for the project I'm working on right now, I actually have a complete spreadsheet that we all work out of. So we always know what key it's in, what the tempo is. Is the demo done? If so, if we have a demo for it, what version of the demo are we on? Because there's times whenever we're throwing different ideas back and forth. So which one is the most current one? So that way we could just search for that file name.
Keeping a spreadsheet, especially when you're doing more on the songwriting and pre-production side of things, and you're going through different revisions of stuff, and like this was so like you're not necessarily throwing anything away. You're keeping all of the ideas to make sure that you have everything to go back to. So you make a demo one idea, and then you're like, okay, well, that's a cool idea. Let's try to make a fresh idea with the same thing. And then you make a demo 2 idea, right? Where it's more of a different like flavor, or maybe slightly different like melodies, or slightly different lyrics, or you know what I'm saying?
Or like what I sent you earlier, where we had 2 different hooks.
Yeah.
And so basically how we do it is, if I'm sending something for more work on it, then I'll typically just name it like song name 1.1 and then 4 top line or something like that. Just so we know, like, this, don't even listen to this unless if you're working on this right now for this specific reason.
Yeah.
And then from there, all of the final revisions are going to be named the number of the song dot the number that of the revision that we're on. And so like that's how I work with like these unnamed like pitch projects where we're writing a ton of songs. And that system has been great. And then on top of that, like I said, it'll be like like song 2.3 for top line. And then that way, okay, well, I know that 2.3 is the one, but then this is the one I'm going to use to lay down this top line, send the tracks over. Once I make the revision, it's now 2.4.
Yeah.
And until we hit final, or if we're working with like a music supervisor, then it would be like approval to know like, hey, this is the demo that got approved. Time to build it out,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's a great one. And like kind of figuring out your own way that you like to name sessions. So like for me, and like from different mixing engineers kind of have their, different ways of labeling things. But I'm going to pull up a session real quick and just kind of, so I've gone through a couple different versions of naming stuff. I'll normally do, let's find like an actual like session. All right, so I'll go artist name. Sometimes artist name is in the middle, but generally it's artist name up front, dash, song name, dash, where I'm at in the project. So like pre-production or edit, like drum edit or vocal edit, or mix. And then I'll do the sample rate, and then the bit depth, and then the BPM, and then the key.
Yep.
And then sometimes I'll do parentheses single, or parentheses like song 1 or something like that, depending on where. So like that'll go with the song name. So it'll go song name and then parentheses either song 1 or single. So that way it's differentiated.
How I started naming my sessions whenever I'm hired to write, because I don't have a song name right off the bat, especially because like, true. If I'm writing a top line, there's a lot of times where like I have to get these things okayed by the vocalist, because at the end of the day, they're the ones singing it. So what I'll do is whoever is the point of contact in the band, if they don't have a band name, or if they do have a band name, it'll be the band name, the month and the year that I'm working on it.
That's a good one.
And then it'll be numbered the way that I was talking about before.
Yeah.
And that's so sick, because I know, hey, if Brandon hits me up, I just search for Brandon. It's like, oh, well, that's the one from last month.
Yeah, exactly.
And because like for me, it's not about going through the directory. It's about being able to search keywords that I'll remember. And I think that that's also super important because everybody works differently. I'm really good at getting organized. I'm really bad at staying organized.
Yeah.
And so there's no point in me having this really complex file system if it's going to get unorganized in a week or two. It takes enough for me to just keep our Dropbox like
I'm
pristine.
Sure. Well, and so that's like the importance of naming is because it makes it searchable. So
exactly.
Like we didn't really clarify that up front, but like the importance of the naming system is something that you will remember, and putting enough information there that if you're collaborating, it makes it easy for somebody else to build their session or know what they're getting into. Kind of all of the information that they're going to need about the session, but also it helps you in the sense of like, oh, I know I was working with this band and they want me to go look at this song and this revision. So all of that information should be in the title. You could just search that information in your Finder or in your search bar of your computer, and it'll pull that session right up, and you just click on it if you can't find it. If it's buried deep down somewhere from like a year and a half ago or something.
Yep. Exactly. And like I said, that's just how I work, because at the end of the day, it's like after all that chaos that happened on my audio drive, there's like no point in me trying to fix it, because knowing my luck, everything that'll be organized, nobody will ask for, and it'll all be the stuff before I made it nice and pretty.
Oh yeah.
So,
that's true.
It's like as long as things are searchable, and if it wasn't for the fact that I didn't know how to name my sessions, I'd probably be in a pretty rough position right now trying to get all of this organized.
Yeah, it'd be impossible to find it.
It would literally be impossible. So just make sure you name your sessions in a way that you could search it, or better yet, make a template for it and stick it on your computer monitor.
Oh yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah, I have some sticky notes over here where I like, if I need something, like always remember something, I always put it like right below my monitor on my right side over here.
Yep.
But so I think that's probably enough about the dialog box stuff, unless you have anything else to say about that. So we can move on.
So the Cubase dialog box, if anybody is on Cubase, instead of creating a session, you can also import anything into a completely fresh session. And so, pro tip for new Cubase users, if you ever are sent MIDI as a tempo track, you can click import from the file menu at the dialog box, import that MIDI file, and then you can export it as a Cubase tempo track and then import that into your template, because Cubase will not allow you to use MIDI as a tempo track, and it will not allow you to make the tempo track within your session. You have to import MIDI into a brand new session. If you create a session and then try to import it, it does not work. And it took me way too long to find anybody who could give me that information. So I just want to put that out into the world right now.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
It's the only thing I hate about Cubase, but honestly, like, it takes an extra 2 minutes, and I do it like once every 3 months.
Yeah, so. But then also like figuring it out took a while.
Dude, seriously, if anybody is on Cubase, if you search for that on Google, you will find no results. You will not find a single video on it either. I had to go to like some forum from like 2008. You know how old I was in 2008, dude? I was in sixth grade. Like,
yeah, I'm
that's a while.
I was in 8th grade.
Aw.
So we move on to Windows and Views, and we say Windows and Views. There's really like 2 or 3 main windows. We say Views because that's more of an Ableton thing. But we'll start with the Windows, and then we'll go to I can talk about the Ableton stuff specifically. But there's really 3 main windows that you're going to use at any given point. There's some sort of session or timeline view. Yes. So, sorry, that's an Ableton term. So there's some sort of timeline view, which is your normal like left to right You see all the audio files on top, stacked on top of each other with all the track names and everything like that.
It's linear.
Yeah, very linear, left to right. Or you have I don't know what Cubase calls it. Pro Tools calls it the mix view, which is like all the faders.
Oh, they literally just call it the mixer.
Okay, so like, and I think that's what Studio One calls it too, is just the mixer, and I think that's also what Logic calls it, is just the mixer.
And that's also what Reaper calls it. It's just the mixer.
Yeah. All. So in Pro Tools, it's the mix view. So it's for those of you who don't know, it's the view where all of the faders are from left to right in order. You can see the physical fader look, all of your mute buttons, and then on top of that generally is like all of your plugins and EQs and compressors and all that kind of stuff on top of that, or any instruments or whatever that you have on that track. And then there's the third one, which is the MIDI view. Some of them are called MIDI editors. I believe in Pro Tools it's called a MIDI editor.
Yeah, that's what it's called in Reaper and Cubase as well.
Yeah, let me look.
And you know, what we're talking about is inside of that project window. If you click on a MIDI track, it'll bring up a separate view. In Cubase, it is docked to the bottom of the screen, and you could set it up so it automatically opens up as its own window.
And that's the same with Logic. You can do the same thing too.
Yeah, it's just a separate window that pops up, so you could edit MIDI. Cubase has a feature where you can edit MIDI in the actual timeline. I think
Pro Tools
I
covered
it all. Yeah. Some DAWs, Pro Tools doesn't have this, but DAWs like Cubase and Studio One, I think Logic does it. I know Reaper doesn't. They also have a separate edit view for audio. So it's the same thing, but instead of editing MIDI, you now have a microscopic view to edit audio, and it'll give you different tools to use. That was foreign to me, and I used to hate it because I was a hardcore Pro Tools user, and I'll tell you what, still hate it, but I use it anyway.
So that's interesting because I didn't know that. We'll go over to the views. So views is kind of specific to Ableton. So Ableton, all the other DAWs, they can be split into multiple windows. So like if you open up a window, like you have your timeline or your linear view, and you have your mix area, mix window, or your mixer, those can be split into two different windows. Like you can pull them onto two totally different screens. You'll notice it in a lot of studios that have multiple computer monitor screens. They'll have, maybe on the left they'll have the mixer up, and on the right they'll have the timeline, like linear view on that side, or a variation of that. Or maybe they'll have like the timeline up on a really big TV up here so everybody can kind of see what's going on, and then they'll have like the mix view here so that they can like tweak stuff and kind of see all the numbers and the details.
There's also like iPad extensions for mixers for most DAWs now.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will just have their mixer on their iPad, so then they could poke it.
Yeah, exactly. Get that touch. So Ableton does not do that. Ableton is all in one. It's kind of made for laptop use. You can definitely tell it was made for people to use on laptops specifically. So there's two views in Ableton. There is the session view, which is unique to Ableton, and then there is the timeline view, which is the same as every other DAW, which is like the left to right, everything stacked on the linear view. But the session view in Ableton is unique because you'll look at it and it looks the same as the mixer window. It is not the same as the mixer window. It has the faders, kind of, but instead of faders, it's got little arrows. It looks very like old. It looks kind of dated, really. It's got little arrows that you can kind of move up and down and as your volume. But then on top of that, where you would normally see plugins, and it looks like there should be plugins there, but there's not plugins. It has clips. So something that Ableton's known for is the ability to loop and create clips in like live inside. A lot of people use it to fire different. They'll loop like a guitar part and then they'll add some drums over it, and you'll see a lot of people do this with different live shows or some live streams. I know a lot of people use it for live streams, and like they'll just play a quick thing and then quantize it real fast because it's really fast at that, and then they'll go down and they'll record a different part and then they'll put them together, or they'll go back and forth between parts and trigger different like small clips or longer clips, different drum loops and things that they just kind of have in there. Your plugins are actually in a totally different window on the bottom. It's really, I hate that. It's like the only.
It like pops up, and in my mind, it like curves down. It looks like I don't know, like the yellow brick road of plugins or something. And it really bugs me. It bugs me so bad.
It's the only DAW that does it, and it gets really weird for people to get used to. So you open it up and it shows you all the plugins that you have on the bottom, and then in that same window, in a different view on that same window, you can also do what you were talking about, that Cubase and Studio One do. It's got an audio, what we in the Ableton stuff is the clip editor. So you can edit that individual audio piece. You can stretch it, quantize it, pitch it up, pitch it down, do all sorts of crazy stuff to it. But yeah, it's kind of unique in that way. But it's kind of intuitive once you get used to it. It's very, very, very fast. I know Josh isn't a fan, but Josh also doesn't use it almost every day, and I do. Do you get super fast at it? Really, really.
I've tried so many times.
Yeah, it's spending a good bit of time with it. You can get crazy fast with it.
Yeah, there's some crazy Ableton guys out there.
Oh yeah, they're nuts. But those are the kind of different views. And like I said, that's really specific. I can't think of another DAW that has that. I don't think there is one. That's very unique to Ableton.
I feel like that's something Bitwig would just throw in to be like, "Hey, we do it all."
Yeah, maybe.
Buy our DAW. So yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up that section. So our next one is track types, dude. Tell me all about the track types.
I mean,
actually, I feel like I should be telling you about it because I think Cubase has the most.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know. I can't even freaking pull up. So yeah, it really depends on what DAW you're using. How many track types you have, because they all call them different things, and some function the same. So I can go through Ableton real quick because they're very fast. So they have audio, and they have MIDI, and that's it.
That's it.
The master faders or the master track, what would be considered a master track, is just a ever present master that exists on the bottom of the screen. But there's not anything other than an audio track or a MIDI track in Ableton. A MIDI track turns into a instrument track whenever you drop an instrument or a virtual instrument onto that track. Then it switches over to a MIDI track or an instrument track automatically.
Yeah, that's how Reaper, I want to say, is like that, where you could just draw on the audio track and you can make MIDI, which is so sick.
Oh, that's crazy. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, I think it is. I could probably do it while I'm recording. By the way, the reason why I just reacted like that is because when I opened up Cubase, my interface decided to turn off the internal clock, and Reaper was still just recording, and I flipped it back, and it was just like, hey, my mic works again. Let's see if I could insert a new track while I do this and then draw on it. Yep. It makes a MIDI event.
Yeah, so it makes it automatic.
Cool.
It turns it into a MIDI track, kind of.
Yeah, and it's so sick that I could do all that while it keeps on recording. Man, I love Reaper.
Yeah.
All right, so in Cubase, they now simplified it. In the previous version on 10, which is my first experience with Cubase, you could either add a track and then there were other tracks. Now it's just all in one big thing. So I have audio, I have instrument. An instrument is going to be where you could then use virtual instruments, but it'll still read MIDI on that track. Or you could feed MIDI into that track. Then you have a sampler track, which is exactly what it sounds like. You can drop a sample onto it and then trigger it through MIDI. So vocal chops for days. Then we got MIDI tracks, which is self-explanatory. Run those into whatever you want. Then I have group tracks. Then I have effect tracks, VCA tracks. Cubase even has marker, ruler, and folder tracks. Then I have tempo, signature, arranger, transpose, chord, and video tracks.
Dang, I didn't even know. What is a transpose track?
So I've never used it. Can only be added once. Oh, so I guess it's literally to just help you transpose things.
Oh.
I wonder, I don't know how to, I can't really do anything with it. Do I draw? Oh, what am I doing? Oh, that's cool. So there's like a different, it's not like a MIDI track, is it? No, it's not a MIDI track. It's just like this block that comes up. No clue what it does. Chord tracks are cool because it'll pull up a little chord pad, and then you could punch in the chords real quick, and then you could either route it to whatever instrument is being monitored, or you could just drag and drop the MIDI. So a lot of times if I know what chords I need to play, I'll just punch them in real quick, drag and drop the MIDI, and then I could quickly just like make whatever voicing of the chord I want. It saves me a bit of time because I don't have a MIDI keyboard here. I still need to buy one.
Oh, nice.
Arranger tracks are very dope because you could go ahead and just drag entire sections of songs around, which is super helpful for people who are songwriters. Signature, that's very simple. It's just a time signature track. Tempo track, obviously the same thing, just for tempos. The ruler is just to get different values for where you're at. Folder track is pretty obvious. You could put tracks inside of a track. Marker, that's also self-explanatory. So, I mean, they're all super helpful, you know. It's just kind of strange that a lot of these are typically just features and not individual tracks.
Yeah, so like in Pro Tools, a lot of those things are just a part of the timeline.
Yeah, they're just a part of the timeline. But honestly, I kind of like this better because now I have less going on up top.
That's true. Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff you can have going on up top, and it's really hard to figure out where a lot of that stuff is sometimes when you're trying to move fast.
Yep.
So with Pro Tools, we have we have audio tracks, instrument tracks, MIDI tracks. Those are not the same thing in Pro Tools. You have VCAs, you have aux tracks, you have, which can be used as sends and returns and whatnot. You have now in the newest update, folder tracks, which are subsected into folder basic, which is just to hold tracks, like a bunch of tracks in, or folder routing, which acts as an automatic routing folder, which is really, really convenient, and it's something that pretty much every other DAW has had.
I don't know what that means.
It's a folder track. So it acts as the basic one doesn't act as like a bus routing. You don't route to it. It just holds things. It's just collapsible. But
okay, so how that works in Cubase is actually really neat, because if you put things in a folder, you could toggle group editing on that folder. You can also just solo everything in that folder or mute everything in that folder.
Mm-hmm.
However,
so it does that.
No audio runs through it.
So the routing folder is essentially that, but audio does run to it.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
So it's like a bus.
Yeah. It's just like a bus and a folder combined.
Exactly. It's a bus and a folder combined. So it made my routing. It makes routing a lot easier because it automatically routes. Yeah, it saves some time. And then you have master tracks. You have video tracks. And I'm sure there's some more that I can't think of. Oh, yeah, VCAs. I think I may have said that. VCA tracks, which is voltage control automation?
Attenuation.
Attenuation? Is that what
I'm Googling it.
I can't remember.
See, I've never used them, and
they're great for automation, dude. They're fantastic for automation, for group automation. Because you can set so in Pro Tools, VCA tracks are read by groups. So you set everything so you can set all of your lead vocals to a group, and then put a VCA to those, and then do all your automation on that, and they move together respectively. So yeah, it's super convenient.
Then that way you don't have to do it for everything.
For individual tracks, exactly.
I've never thought to do that. You're a genius. Because all I ever heard was, well, it's really only used for live stuff.
No, it's really convenient for automation. It makes stuff way faster.
So it actually stands for voltage controlled amplifier.
Amplifier, that's what it is. Yep. Voltage control amplifier, because back in the day it was a literal amplifier that was separated that you turned up and down.
Yep.
But so yeah, it's super convenient. So it could be used both ways, as you do automation on the VCA track, or you can use it to say, I need all of my vocals to run to this. And so you just put all of your vocals on it, and it's great for like doing mix revisions. If people are like, oh, I just want all the vocals are too loud, I want all the vocals down by like half a dB or a dB, you just drop them a dB on the VCA. You don't have to mess with it.
Yeah, that's real nice. That's beautiful. Yeah, I might have to start using those.
Yeah, it's super convenient for things like that.
Yeah. I think that we covered everything for the track types.
Yeah, so most of those are pretty consistent, or there will be. I think you were right. I think Cubase had the most, and
Reaper has the least.
There will be similar versions to all of those in every DAW.
Yeah,
it's going to be pretty consistent.
They're either going to be a combination of certain things, or they'll be their own thing. Mm-hmm. By the way, we missed a session view.
No, I talked about
Studio One. For Studio One, there is something called a scratch pad, which is a separate timeline that pulls up, where you could write in it and then drag the whole thing over to the real timeline. It's literally a scratch pad for audio, and just so everybody knows, that feature is incredible. And I was thinking about that while you were talking about VCAs.
Yeah, I never get to use that. Yeah,
dude, it's so good. I used to use it all the time, and now I just I just write hits every single day, so I don't even need to scratch anything, you know. So it's not even a problem.
It's not even a problem. I only write hits.
It's the sound of hits.
It's the sound of hits, man. So we're moving on to transport controls. So we can hit these really, really fast. That's transport controls is just a fancy term for like your play, stop, record, those next, back, beginning of song, end of song, rewind, fast forward. Those are all your transport controls. If you don't know what those are already, those are pretty basic, like on any kind of VCR, anything like that. Like that's pretty normal.
Yeah, and then you will get some other things. I mean, I consider them transport controls, like your marker position locations, punch in, punch out, the different kind of record modes for MIDI and audio, even your tempo. You know, I mentioned a tempo track earlier. If I don't have any tempo changes, I adjust the tempo on my transport control. Cubase actually has its own transport thing that you could pop up and move around.
Pro Tools
if you don't like it too in the session. And I just have mine set up so the separate one has some marker quick points, and if you don't
also your pre-roll, post-roll stuff. Like if you want to set up like a count in, like if you're tracking guitar and you're tracking yourself and you want to have a 2-bar pre-roll going into a part.
Yep.
You can do that.
Use that all the time, plus your metronome settings, which I use all the time. Those things are all going to vary from DAW to DAW. I have a ton of different like MIDI and record options and punch in, punch out stuff. If you don't know what that means, I highly suggest you just type that into YouTube, watch some videos on the different ways to record both audio and MIDI in your specific DAW, because they all do things pretty much the same way, but getting there is a bit different.
Yeah, exactly.
And it makes your life a lot easier, so just learn it.
For sure, especially, and you can like figure out what shortcuts, and we're going to get into that kind of stuff, but shortcuts and hotkeys, we kind of talked about that last episode, about how important your hotkeys are, and most of your transport controls are tied to a hotkey or some sort of shortcut on your keyboard.
Yep, precisely. And if they're not, most modern DAWs, you can always assign one.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's all we really have to say about that, because the honest truth is that they're all going to have like different options, but at the end of the day, a quick YouTube search will get everybody exactly what they need to know.
Exactly. All right, so we can move on to tools and track controls. So I'm actually going to pull up Pro Tools real quick. Pro Tools has a bunch of tools. I know you're not a fan of the multi-tool, but I love it. So what we mean by tools is whenever you hover over different pieces of audio in DAWs, you get your icons changed, your mouse icons change if you're on a multi-tool. But it essentially lets you do things like zoom in and out. It lets you trim audio regions, and that could also turn into like time stretching audio regions, selecting different audio regions and deleting things, like for deleting or moving or anything like that. Grabbing whole audio regions and moving them around on your timeline. A pencil tool for like either writing in MIDI, writing in automation changes, different things like that. And also in Pro Tools there's a scrubber tool. I don't know if you have a scrubber tool. You know what I'm talking about though? That audio thing.
Yeah. I have one. I don't know what it's called. It's called Play. Which is actually like kind of really funny.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the main ones in Pro Tools. I mean, we don't have a ton.
I have a ton.
We have drop down menus for more, like loop tools, and then hand tool can turn into separation. But most of the things that are tools, I just use as shortcuts. I have shortcuts for.
So the cool thing about Cubase is the right click does absolutely nothing. It just doesn't do anything. So the first time you sit down with Cubase, if you come from other DAWs, you're gonna be like, life sucks, and it's because it does. But
real tough.
It's beautiful because it forces you to get used to switching tools quickly just using your mouse. So I don't even use my hotkeys because I don't even switch tools because I don't make mistakes. And so I have a ton of tools, dude. There's so many, and there's probably still more tracks and tools, but I have the object selection tool. Okay. If I right click and then I long left click on it, I can then make it so it will time stretch.
Oh yeah.
And then there's also one where it's sizing moves contents, which I'm pretty sure is just like moving the audio within the event. I think I've never used it because if you do Command Option on Cubase, it'll just pull that up automatically, so you could do that.
Yeah.
Then I have a range selection, which I rarely use unless if I'm copying and pasting everything. I have the draw tool, which I also rarely use for like drawing automation and stuff. I have the erase tool, which I also never use. I have the split tool, which I only use if I swear that there's a hotkey for it, but I don't have any audio in front of me, so now I'm really thinking that I'm
probably like Command E or
no. This is just, I'm on a Windows keyboard, so that's Option.
Option. It would be Option.
And it doubles as like a drawing tool also if you want to draw audio events. But yeah, that's how you cut. And yeah, that's actually the draw tool. It comes up with Option, but it doubles as a splitter. But there is if you hit Option X, it'll cut it the way that you would in Pro Tools, where it cuts at the marker. Yeah, it's cool. That's the cool thing about Cubase. They don't really force you to work one way. They're like, well, you know, we know that we have users who are longtime Cubase users, and then we also have Pro Tools users. So it's like you could pick how you want to work in it.
Yeah.
So if you want to select the tool, you can. If you want to hit Option, you can. If you want to hit Option X, you can. And I do all three all the time because it depends on what I'm doing. So yeah, that's the splitter tool. I also have the glue tool, which I'm guessing, yeah, it just like heals audio tracks if you drag them. It just like fills in space in between them, and it will also glue them back together, which is actually like really strange. I've never used that. I have the mute tool, which is actually really cool. And this is another weird like Cubase thing that I never knew, but if you render in place, so if you render a section, it'll make a new track, print it, and then the other one, the audio is like grayed out, and you're like, what's up with that? It makes no sound. That's because it mutes that event, which is actually really, really cool, because that means if you're in a weird situation where you're comparing two different things and you want to keep another, like instead of just keeping it in the lane, like,
yeah, you just drag it to make a new track, drag it down and mute it.
Right. You could just mute the audio. So you say if it's like a snare hit, right? If you're comparing samples, you could just keep those in there and then just mute them. And it's really neat because then you don't have to use a whole separate track or whatever. And like, that's neat. I have a zoom tool. We all know what that is. I have a comp tool, which is killer. And I rarely...
So there is basically just doing the playlisting in a tool.
So I have playlists also. They're called lanes.
Oh, yeah. So yours is similar to mine and also similar to Logic. Logic has different lanes.
Yeah. So if I use the comp tool, I just select what I want to keep and it'll move. It'll just like if my lanes are all down here, I could select them all and then they'll pop up on the top lane.
Yeah.
It makes comping really cool. I really don't comp vocals though. Like with how because I'm very picky about keeping things organized when I do vocals. So there's enough space that I rarely need to comp, you know, like how people traditionally do. But the few times that I've done like where I've sped through things in a studio and I've had to comp things traditionally, that tool, it's so quick.
Yeah.
And then I also have a time warp tool, which is just like the it's, I don't know what I'm saying. It's just like, it's probably the most useless thing in the world. And I'll tell you why. Cubase does not understand that most people don't just like not use a click track. So this is to literally bend the tempo in certain places. It's like how I would imagine they tracked a Knocked Loose record. And yeah, it's utterly useless. I could see maybe like a composer using it. Like, you know, we all know Hans Zimmer uses Cubase, and maybe he would do that, but I still think that he would just use a tempo track.
Yeah,
and
not
give like move things by hand. It's like the manual tempo thing that you learn in audio school for no reason.
Yeah.
And then I have a line tool which I use for pitch bending and automation and stuff like that. And then I have the scrubber, and then a color tool for coloring my tracks.
Oh, nice.
So I just spent like 3 years explaining tracks and tools on Cubase, and now none of our listeners are ever going to get Cubase.
Yeah, is a lot. So a lot of those tools in Pro Tools and in Ableton are just shortcuts. They're not set up as tools.
Yeah,
they're set up as just like mute. Your mute tool for me is just Command M. I'm on Mac, and then like a cutting tool for me is just Command E.
Yeah. Yeah, see, I don't think that there's even a key. Like if I press M, it mutes the track. And if I do Command M, it's markers. But that mute function is like one of the more obscure things, but it's also like, it's pretty neat.
Oh, I use it all the time. Because if there's like, I'll copy tracks, and if I want to keep a part to see if I like it so say there's a verse, I've duplicated the MIDI track because I want to keep the same MIDI, but I want to layer in a new synth or something, right? But I want to come in the second time, not the first, but the MIDI is playing on both times. I just mute the MIDI or the audio on the first time to see if I like it. I can hear it. If I want it in, I can just unmute it. It's there. Don't have to worry about it. No erasing or anything like that. I just keep that audio and or MIDI clip.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So if it's 8 bars, you just mute the first 4.
Exactly.
That's neat.
It's a super fast way to see if I like things quickly or not, or instead of having to erase it and then I do want it in there now, and then I have to copy and paste everything back.
Yeah. I think I don't think that there's any other tools. I mean, you do have different tools depending on the window. So
True.
Like if I open up my audio editor, then it will actually only give me like half of those tools. If I have a MIDI editor, then it's typically a drawing tool, or there's different modifiers. Like in Cubase, you have the MIDI editor, but then you also have the drum MIDI editor. So they react differently, and so your commands react differently also. And so I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of it just ends up being hotkeys for most DAWs, but it just turns out I have a ton of tools.
So now we're back to learn your hotkeys, folks. Learn your shortcuts, learn your hotkeys for whatever DAW you're using. Because it is listing all of those is extremely tiresome, and having to search through all of those to figure out the right thing to use is probably even more tiresome. So if you know your hotkeys and your shortcuts, it makes everything way easier, and you're not having to go menu diving.
Yep.
So now we're going to track controls, which they're super simple. We can just buzz through these real quick. It's on your individual tracks. So when you open up when you have an audio track in your session, it is things like your mute, your solo, your fader, your panning. Your fader being your volume up or down, and your panning being the position of that sound from the stereo field from left to right. Then you also have your record button, your record arm, which is it just looks like a record button, but in a lot of DAWs you have to have that selected in order for it to record.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have also, in some, you have the input monitoring, which is the ability to hear is the ability to hear something but not have it armed for recording.
Yep, or to just monitor while you're recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, not Cubase, Reaper actually has a bunch of different monitor options. They have I'm pretty sure you could set it to post and pre, which is like really cool for your effects. And it has like auto monitor on, or you could just turn it off or keep it on. And so like, yeah, there's just some different variations. So just like look up what monitoring is for your DAW so you get it. Pro Tools, Cubase, I think Logic, it's all very simple.
They're all pretty much the same. And then you also get into things like your inserts, which are your plugins, so your general EQ, compression, what have you, things like that. And then also your instrument plugins if it's an instrument track, like your synths and your pianos and your drums and things like that. And also sends for sending things to group tracks or sending things to reverbs and delays on different auxiliary tracks.
And in some DAWs you will even have like more options. Like in Cubase on my inspector, it's called, I have quick controls, so I can set like a bunch of controls for my track controls, so they're just right there on the side.
Yeah.
So like if I wanted to like hard pan something, I could just like I could have my pan down there instead of having to open up the other one, which I should probably do a lot more, because clicking up here or scrolling, like depending on where your cursor is, it'll either scroll really slow or really fast, and it's not a ton of space. So using a trackball, it's hard to get to just the right space. So
yeah, I could totally see that.
Like things like that just like speed you up a bit more are fantastic. Or for MIDI, I have a ton of stuff. Like I have something called Midi Modifiers that's just built into my inspector for the track controls, which allows me to like randomize like how accurate it reads MIDI. So like it'll make drums never be perfectly on the grid and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
And like, yeah, it's just like a little bar on the side. And it took me like, dude, this was a huge learning curve coming from Pro Tools where like none of that's a thing.
Yeah.
And once I like sat, because to like, you know, the first time you look at it, you're like, what the heck is all that? And it's the same thing on Studio One. But like, man, this stuff, like it gets pretty powerful, you know? Because then it even gives you like MIDI inserts and stuff like that. And so it's
I don't even know what that is.
So I could
almost way too many options.
Yeah, I have a thing called Beat Designer. I have a thing called the Arpeggio.
That's random. Well,
and
that like, that even kind of moves us on to the next section we were going to do, is like fun, weird stuff in our DAWs.
Yeah, dude, we've been on it the whole time on Cubase. Here I am.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Cubase is one of the most interesting DAWs because it's like the best of Pro Tools and the best of Ableton combined, but then with a bunch of weird German stuff in it too. And I love it, man, because like there's just so much in here. Like I was talking about the chord track. I could have MIDI tracks follow the chord track. And then you could set up like, so it automatically uses different chord voicings. Like it gets in depth, and it makes sense why these huge composers use it.
No, yeah, for sure.
Because you could really, really do a lot with it. Oh yeah, there's also track versions. So like if I want to change a track, like I could just like duplicate it and then just go back and forth between two different tracks. So if I wanted to, instead of having a separate track for like a top line, like I could just save, like I could just duplicate it and then flip back and forth between the two in real time while the song's playing. And
yeah, well, I was gonna say the mix screenshots.
Yeah, I have those too. It's the same thing, but with a track.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. But I mean, at the end of the day, could I simply just track that and then flip between two lanes or playlists, whatever you call them in your DAW? Sure. Or I could do this, you know, because now in this, it's easier to do all of the editing involved than it is to record it, select that, do all the editing, and then drag it back down and then flip or whatever you have to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's like a ton of cool stuff about that. If I go to my mixer, I can save mix snapshots, which is incredible for revisions. So if I mix something, I save a snapshot, send it to the band. They tell me what they hate. I fix it, save the snapshot, send it back to them. They tell me that they hate it even more. I now click the first snapshot that I took, send them the same mix that they got the first time, and now it's perfect.
Yep.
Even though it's the same thing, and no, I've never done that. But the idea is that I could quickly change, instead of saving a whole new session, I can now flip in between mixes like that. And
almost real time.
Yeah, it's sick. And then Cubase also has a history. So anything I changed just in the mixer, I could go back and undo. It has configurations, so I can arrange my mixer a certain way and save a configuration. I can my mouse just died.
Nice.
And when it did it, my AirPods went out too.
Nice.
Why is this not connecting? Did everything just break? Did we just get EMP'd?
Dude, we just get EMP'd. All of your technology just started hating you at the same time.
Hey, it's working again. Cool.
Okay. I was gonna say I can go. So weird thing. It's not even weird. It's just like a feature that I've only found in Pro Tools is Beat Detective. That's like the only thing that is kind of unique to Pro Tools. It is amazing though, and it is one of the fastest ways to edit drums and also sometimes guitars, depending on what genre of music you're doing. There's also in Ableton the crazy audio editing abilities, like I was discussing earlier, the session view with the clips, being able to try out a bunch of ideas and then just like flip through different variations of guitar parts or drum parts or a bunch of ideas and then build a song out of it. It's super detailed. We'll have to do I actually want to do maybe a video on like just the simplicity of like writing a quick song idea in Ableton using the session view. It's extremely unique.
So another weird thing, not to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
But one, there are functions in Cubase that make it very similar to Beat Detective. Two, we have an entire rack just for VSTs, VST instruments. Mm-hmm. So I could just quickly swap out instruments on the right side of my screen. I also have what's called the control room. And this is neat for people who work in like surround sound or do any sort of like down mixing, or if you have multiple sets of monitors, this can also act as a monitor controller for you, which is really, really cool.
That's crazy.
It's actually too much for what I use it for, to be honest. Because all I use it for is I have this set up, so I have certain, like my click will only play to my headphones unless if I change the turn up the volume on it on the control room. And I do that because I do a lot of vocal tracking, and that's really cool if I'm like in between. That way, whenever I'm listening to the take, I don't have to keep turning off the metronome.
For sure.
And it's great though, because you literally just set up the routing so it just goes right to my headphone output, and it is a beautiful thing. I used to fight with it a lot in the past. I used to have a lot of weird issues with it, but since I got it configured, I've never had to mess around with it since. And yeah, it's great because I could just toggle the metronome on and off from right there, and then just leave it on in the project window, and it won't play on my speakers, but it'll play on my headphones. And I have it set up through the UAD console, so my vocals also only monitor through my headphones and not through my speakers. So,
routing, man. Like we said last episode, learn your routing so that you can do crazy stuff like only send your click to the person who's tracking and not send it to the room, or only monitor a vocal while they're tracking, but let them have an entire mix by themselves. Learn how to do that kind of stuff. It is very, very helpful. Very helpful. We're going to do one more thing, and then we're going to go to our last point. We're going to talk about media pool and auto backups, because we're already we're past an hour and a half already.
I know.
So
we're only halfway through, so this is going to be a two-parter.
Yeah, this will be a two-parter. This will be DAWs, and then we'll do a whole nother episode on interfaces. So media pool auto backups. This is amazing. So I don't know, you have this too. Pro Tools has this thing on the right side of your window called a media pool. It is where every piece of audio that goes into that session is found. It is essentially pulling from the audio folders dedicated to that session. And you can find every single piece of audio that's ever been, whether it's been edited, comped, everything is deleted. It still exists there. When you delete something in your DAW, it is not gone forever. It still exists in that bin.
Yep.
Unless you do something called destructive recording, and then it is erased forever. But that's a whole different conversation, and you should probably never use destructive recording, because why would you?
It's 2020.
Yeah, why would you? So
grow up.
Yeah, it's 2020, man. Grow up. On that media bin, you can literally find every single piece of audio that exists that has ever existed in your session since that session began. So if you accidentally erase something, it is there still. It exists in that bin. You can find it. It is not gone forever. It's going to be kind of a nightmare sometimes to find it, depending on your DAW. And even then, still, it's probably going to be a nightmare to find it.
I like Cubases because it's not docked like it is in Pro Tools.
Yeah.
And so mine is just called Open Pool Window, and then you could click on that, and it pulls up all the audio tracks. And now there's two different kinds of like existences of audio in Cubase, and it's called musical mode or linear mode. So the difference is that if you import something, it'll like guess the encoded tempo and then stretch it, or if you change the tempo, it'll either stretch it or it'll just keep it there. In that media pool, you can even change that, which is crazy.
That's
nuts.
Nuts.
So in Cubase, whenever you import like a sample, it'll be like, hey, do you want to conform it to the sample rate and bit depth? And if you say no, and it gets all wacky, and you go into there, then you could delete it, and re-import it and it'll prompt you for that again. But if you just drag it in again, that's not a new piece of audio because it's still in the media pool. Yeah. So it'll still be imported as all stretched out and weird, you know? So yeah, that's, learn your media pool. Plus, if you're sharing sessions with people, if you know for a fact you don't need anything that's been deleted, then you could go ahead and just clear out your media pool. There's an option on all DAWs. I know that I have one. I haven't used it in a hot minute, but it's literally just an option that basically states, hey, why don't you delete all unused audio?
Yeah, delete unused audio is huge. Cleans up your session, makes it way smaller, especially when you're sending stuff back and forth. It will definitely help you in the long term of, I mean, you start getting 90 to 100 track counts, which is pretty common in like your pop and your more radio rock centric, you know, stuff. You can get up there really triple digit track counts really fast. So deleting unused audio will save you so much CPU power on your computer to make it easier to run the session without having to have a crazy high power computer to run 7,000 tracks of DAW audio at the same time because it's having a DAW of 7,000 tracks of audio at the same time because it's having to compensate for all of that media pool that you're not touching.
So yeah, I think that we basically auto backups. Every DAW does auto backups.
Yeah,
now.
Every DAW does auto backups. If you accidentally erase your session, there is an auto backup for it. It does exist. Do not have a heart attack.
Or if you can never seem to find luck with any DAW not crashing constantly, like after I updated Cubase to 10.5, now every time I open Cubase for the first time, crashes immediately. And then I have to restart it. But, you know, Cubase will even do it where it's like, hey, you know, we did this auto backup before you saved. Do you want to open that? I'm like, yeah, sure, little guy. And then it even renames the session for me in case if I want to go back to the old one.
Yeah, dude. Pro Tools has gotten much better with the update about their auto backups. It's more frequent now, which is nice. And Ableton does super frequent auto backups, like almost to the point where it's annoying, but it has saved my tail so many times. But they do exist, just so you know. If your session file gets corrupted, that's happened a lot. That happened a couple times to me as well, where the session file gets corrupted. It does exist. You can go back. You are not completely shot from ever working on that project again. And Josh's headphones died.
You know the episode's too long when my headphones die.
Exactly. Thank you for sticking with us. We have one more thing to say about this, and it is the most important thing. Regardless of what DAW you choose, DAWs do not make you sound good.
What do you mean, dude? I bought Ableton and everything changed. Wasn't that like something Millennium said or something like that? I don't know. My brother kept talking about that because I was like, dude, I'm going to try to learn Ableton again. And he's like, I bought Ableton and everything changed.
Everything changed.
And I'm like, how do you know about this?
Yeah,
and
dude.
It was some like EDM guy like was endorsed and he said that. But
maybe. But
yeah, I bought Cubase because Drew Falk uses it.
Yeah, and he's the man. But I use Ableton because Andrew Wong uses it.
And what's crazy is one of our favorite producers is Jordan Fish, and we realized that he literally produces in Pro Tools.
Yeah, which is unheard of for like electronic music, really.
Yeah, I've seen like one video of a professional guy working in Pro Tools for like a pop song, like producing it. And so it really just goes to show if you learn your DAW and you're quick with it, then basically getting to the point where you are so quick that you get your ideas out faster than anybody else, then you are going to be the most optimized and you're going to be the most, I guess, successful at achieving what you're trying to achieve creatively. So if you're a producer, simply go with whatever makes the most sense and whatever is the fastest for you.
Yeah, whatever makes most sense with how you think. That is so important. For me, that's why I use 2 different DAWs. Ableton makes more sense for me when I'm songwriting and when I'm producing a track. But when it comes to editing and when it comes to mixing, Pro Tools makes more sense for me. Just because it makes more sense in that scenario. And it's fine to have multiple DAWs.
Yeah, it's totally fine. I used to think that Pro Tools made the most sense to me, and something just didn't feel right. So I tried Studio One, didn't make the most sense to me. Got Cubase, all of a sudden, hey, it makes the most sense. And I am now writing way faster than I ever did with Pro Tools. Is my editing as quick? Probably not. I'm getting there. I will get there.
But that's
it's fine. I don't do a ton of editing work anymore.
It's also putting the time in with it on your editing. And since you don't do as much editing anymore, like, you're not going to be as fast.
Right. Because I don't practice as much, really.
But the point being, just pick one, man. Like,
and learn it. It's so good.
They don't sound different. There's stuff floating around that says they like sound different, and there, if you put like a scale on it, like some sort of analyzer, like maybe it sounds like slightly different, but it doesn't sound different. Like, it doesn't really sound different. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense.
Like, it's not gonna, your DAW is not gonna be the reason that your mixes suck. The DAW is not going to be a reason that your song is bad.
Yeah.
That's going to be because you didn't put the time in to learn it.
Well, that's like, Maddie, my girlfriend, she's a graphic designer and she's all about Adobe products. And then she realized, hey, these people are putting out art way quicker than me. And then she finds out that they're using an app that isn't an Adobe product on an iPad. And it's like, well, it's not about your tools, I mean, there's a certain standard of what people expect, of what quality expects.
For sure.
But as far as like home studios go, like we're both running Apollos, decent computers and software.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Fairly inexpensive microphones, So, it's really just about learning what you have and
learning to use it to the best of its ability, and you're like pushing yourself to learn it so well that you cannot be beaten in that DAW. Be the best Reaper producer ever. Be the best Ableton producer or mixer that you've ever seen.
Dude, you see those guys in Make Pop producing on Reaper?
Dude.
That's even crazier to me than producing on Pro Tools.
I know,
so,
man.
like, shout out to the Reaper homies because they took the time to learn it and program it to work the way that they want it to.
So if you don't know, if you're getting into Reaper, if you think Reaper's an interesting option, be prepared to learn a tiny bit of programming, because you have to program every piece of that software.
Pretty much.
But whenever you are done, it is unique to your workflow, and that is what's crazy cool about it. Because you can program it to be the fastest thing that anybody's ever seen when you are behind it.
Mm-hmm. And then I would go up to it and I'd be like, what is this?
Yeah, exactly. Why does the thing work right?
Yeah. So Reaper's strange. A lot of people complain about Reaper and say it sucks, but really it's really, really great. People just don't learn to use it.
It's just different.
It's different. I mean, that's how all DAWs are, dude.
Exactly.
I mean, I've seen metal guys use FL Studio, and I've seen metal guys use Ableton.
Yep.
And apparently we see pop producers using Pro Tools and Reaper. So it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you're from or what you're using. It matters what you make.
Exactly. So let's give them our, let's say we'll each give our top 3 DAWs if they're looking for one to start with.
To start with?
Yes.
Cubase.
Top 3.
Well, okay, top 3. Oh, dude, I'll just give my top 3.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So, like my first 3. So I started out on Reaper, which honestly I probably wouldn't recommend. So scratch that. Don't start out on Reaper unless if you're sure that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Start out on something like Studio One. Studio One is very easy to get started on, and it's the more advanced functions that didn't really click with me. But Studio One is a great one.
There's a lot of great guys. Our buddy Chris Davis works out of Studio One. Our buddy Brandon Allshouse, a mastering engineer, works out of Studio One. It's extremely flexible across a bunch of different aspects.
Yep, and it'll get the job done. And it's also affordable because it's scalable. You could buy the base model and build it up to the full model.
Exactly.
You know, I keep saying model.
Yeah.
And yeah, Studio One. I would also recommend Cubase because it's in between kind of the spectrum, and then honestly probably Pro Tools because Pro Tools is different and it sucks in a lot of ways, but it's great in a lot of other ways, and it's industry standard still. I mean, with the huge wave of veteran producers, that's not really true, but like just under like Pro Tools, if I didn't learn routing and editing on Pro Tools, I wouldn't have gotten it probably as quickly on anything else. Pro Tools made the most sense to me, and it's still probably like my favorite thing to record and edit in.
Oh yeah,
even though I don't own a copy of it.
Yeah, it is. So I'll do mine real quick. I would agree. Pro Tools for me is it's simple because it is set up like a soundboard. It is very much if you've ever put your hand or eyes on a live soundboard, it is very easy to look at that and draw the similarities to Pro Tools, and it makes sense.
Yep.
So if you're coming from a live sound perspective and you're trying to get into recording, Pro Tools is a great way to go with that. Everything's going to make pretty close sense, and there's going to be a learning curve. Obviously, there's a learning curve with all of these, but I will say there's the most information out there about Pro Tools. That is another reason. It is very easy to just go on YouTube, type in something about Pro Tools, and find 7 million videos explaining that thing in a bunch of different ways in extreme detail.
Yep, and because Pro Tools is so rigid in how it works, there isn't 5 ways to do one thing. So you're going to get an answer whenever you type in that Google search. In Cubase, I was trying to learn how to do like tab to transient and cut things with a hotkey, and I couldn't get any results because that's a pretty new feature, I guess. And for years, everybody in Cubase was slip editing a completely different way that anybody else in the world was.
Yeah.
They just learned how to do it that way, and so that's how they still do it. But for me, being a Pro Tools transplant, it's like, how do I edit like Pro Tools? And finally, I found one dude was like, hey, I just switched from Pro Tools, and this is how you do it.
Yeah, there you go.
You know? Yeah. So, like, that's the cool thing about Pro Tools. Like, there's one way to do it. You're going to find an answer.
And once you learn it, it's super fast. You get really fast at it really, really quick.
You get so quick.
Yeah. So that I think that's a good way. And another reason why it's really good for entry level is there's a free version. Pro Tools First is free. So, and it's very functional. Very, very functional for people that are just getting into it. I know I'm actually working on transitioning all of our podcasts in the podcast network to work off of all of our non-audio guys to work off of Pro Tools First, because they can send me a Pro Tools session, I can open it up and immediately edit it. Very consistent across that way, and it's super easy to use. So that's my first option. You know, my second option is going to be, or my other option is going to be Ableton. The other one that I use, it's very great for producing. If you're a fan of Andrew Wong or any of the like for flip the same sample kind of videos, a lot of those guys are using Ableton because it is so focused on the sample manipulation aspect. That is something that it is, I would argue, the best at. It is the best at sample manipulation and turning a sound into something otherworldly, like turning a car door into a kick, turning a siren into a snare for some reason.
Yeah, I don't understand how it works. It's magical.
It's amazing. So
because it doesn't work like that in any other DAW.
So from the creative side, it is a creative powerhouse. You can make sounds that people are gonna be completely confounded that you even were able to make that out of anything, nonetheless, just inside a DAW. The problem with it, the big flaw, is it is pretty expensive. That's kind of the drawback with it, is I had to pay, I think the suite, so the largest version for Ableton Live 10, which is the most recent version, is like $800.
It's $750, and
$750.
I mean, not to like correct you over $50, but
No.
What I was just pulling up is, so standard is $450, but I
Mhm.
just saw it on sale for $300 a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, so
and it goes on sale often.
They
and
do
I know
go on sales
Cubase
often.
runs sales often, but let's
Mhm.
put it this way: I bought my crossgrade license from Pro Tools to Cubase when it was on sale for like $325.
Mhm.
But I just saw this standard full license that you don't need to have another DAW to get that price for, and it was like the same price as what I paid for my clearance crossgrade license.
And also Ableton's website does do 50% off deals or 40% off deals like every single Christmas.
Yeah, dude, they're so good about sales.
Yeah, they're amazing.
I'm looking up the licenses for Cubase. So I guess I probably didn't actually save that much money because the crossgrade right now is $330. So I guess I must have missed the sale. But
yeah,
regardless, like, you know, I think the full version of Cubase is $500.
Yeah, it's $500 even.
You know, they're doing monthly, like a subscription for Pro Tools now.
Yeah, so the Pro Tools subscription is like either $30 or $25 depending on like your contract. But like I said, it's pretty affordable. Entry level is pretty cheap. I said it at the beginning, Ableton, you can get a version of it for free with a lot of MIDI controllers. So maybe if you're thinking, oh, I might want to get into Ableton, it looks interesting, you could like maybe download a free version to like test it out, see if it makes sense with you. If you're like, I'm vibing with this, cool, let's maybe go find a MIDI controller where you can get a free copy of Ableton just as a part of it. So yeah, and then my third one, I would have to agree with Cubase, because it is in every single way the perfect marriage between Pro Tools and Ableton. It is a lot of great features from Ableton, a lot of great features from Pro Tools, and kind of the flexibility of Reaper. Not in that level of extreme, but it is very, very flexible.
Yeah, like instead of you just having one way to do something, you could do the same thing like a few different ways, which is super important to me because I also don't like working one way all the time, you know?
Well,
so
it really
like
just depends on
in
what
a lot
you're
of
doing.
ways, like that could be a pro and it could be a con depending on what type of person you are. But if I only had to pick one DAW, it would be Cubase, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would agree with that. If I was stuck with one DAW, I would pick Cubase because it does Ableton stuff and Pro Tools stuff in it. But I don't have to worry about that. And I like keeping my separation because I like producing in one and being creative in Ableton and then moving to a more
separate space
and moving to a more analytical mindset inside Pro Tools. But awesome. Yeah. So if you have any questions, feel free to email us, hit us up on the Instas. Or, you know, if you find us anywhere else, we're always down to chat. Thanks for coming to hang out today. Josh, thanks for
super long episode.
I know.
And I hope that we didn't just bore everybody to death. And I just realized that my audio is still recording. I'm just really zoomed out really far. I almost just cried.
No, we've been talking for almost 2 hours, or actually 2 hours.
It's been 2 hours.
So thanks for coming and hanging out with us. Thanks for listening to 2 hours of DAW talk.
This is the most boring 2 hours of your life, but at least you just got it over with.
There's a lot of information in here, and if you're new to recording, to be honest, this is a lot of information that you probably needed, and it probably sparked some questions that you can go now do some research on, make notes, things like that. Go back through, make some notes about things that you want to look up. And once again, if you have any questions, feel free to hit us up. We're always down to talk.
Yep.
So.
And the cool thing is that this was super kind of, bland. But next week's episode is going to be a blast.
True. We have a fun episode lined up about production and producing and mixing and things like that. So if you're super into that, come check it out next week. It'll be a freaking blast. In the meantime, thanks for coming and hanging out, and we'll see you next time.
See you around.
And that's it for this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Go check us out on Instagram at Home Studio Hangout. Give us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. And don't forget, keep on creating. See you next week.